Afternoon and welcome to another edition of In Depth. I'm Jerry Miller. Today, we once again are talking with Idaho State University Athletic Director Pauline Thiros. And on the heels of the Big Sky Conference postponing football season until the spring of 2021, the Big Sky presidents voted last night to do the same thing with the other fall sports. Pauline, give us all the details you can about that decision.
Well, certainly the football decision last week was really difficult, and nobody wanted to take all these decisions at once. It's a very, very heavy undertaking, and we felt like our student athletes just deserved every last ounce of consideration we could give to the possibility of executing a season. So as this week rolled forward, the athletic directors met. Eastern Washington dropped their announcement on Monday that they would be suspending fall sports because they just simply, in the state of Washington right now, are in a situation where they really can't even practice effectively to pull off a competition. And we have other schools in the Big Sky that are in the same boat. So it became a decision that was not only based on health and safety, which we think it certainly is the right decision in that aspect, but also we had to consider what kind of a season we were going to grant our student athletes. What kind of season could we execute for them? And if it wasn't going to be meaningful and include a full schedule, and it was going to be a season full of stop and go execution, that would be very frustrating. We didn't feel like putting them in that situation to use a year of their eligibility was very responsible or fair. So all of those things went into making the decision to postpone fall sports so that they could truly be ready to have the hopes of a full and a meaningful season. And that was a major driving force.
And you're saying the athletic directors unanimously voted to postpone fall sports, and then the presidents made the official decision last night.
Yes, the athletic directors supported that recommendation as a group very robustly, and the presidents did as well.
How difficult does the geographical size of the Big Sky Conference make it to try to move forward?
Well, it does make it a little bit more challenging because it's not the kind of a conference. I've spoken to a lot of colleagues in other conferences. The nature of their travel is such that they're in a controlled environment with their team on a bus and they go. And that's a little bit safer. In the Big Sky, it absolutely requires flights. We can't be having 2-day bus rides on either end of a trip where we're going to miss a considerable amount of school and compromise just the preparation and the recovery of student athletes as well. So that is a part of the decision. But for the most part, traveling and being in those venues in a number of different states who are all in different levels of security and openness, it just made it very, very challenging in the Big Sky. And clearly, this isn't an easy problem for any conference. We're seeing conferences make this decision by the hour more and more. And I think that we're to the point where it's a foregone conclusion that all of the fall sports championships will be moved to the spring by the NCAA because of the numbers. And so clearly, our travel is a factor, but this isn't easily done no matter what the layout of your conference is.
In the aftermath of these decisions, a number of fans have brought up the belief that athletes actually would be safer being in an on-campus environment, being tested on a daily basis, than they actually will be if they are at home and not involved in organized activities. Was that ever part of the conversation?
That was not a large part of the conversation. You know, our student athletes are going to be here at Idaho State University attending class through the hybrid model that the university's put forth anyway. So they're going to be here. They're still going to be training in their cohorts. They're still going to be executing practice with their team. And so, yes, we do think after experiencing a spring where, at least from the mental health standpoint, and their just feeling of having some control of their own improvement and their own performance and continuing to make advances in their sport and in their abilities, they're going to have a better experience and an opportunity to continue to be feeling like a collegiate athlete here. There's no question about that, but I don't think that it means it's safe enough to compete with all of the variables that introduces into the equation.
You're not through, because there is an overlap actually in the fall semester. Decisions haven't been made yet about Big Sky basketball for both the men and the women. Where do you go with that now?
Well, I think that the decisions made by the Pac-12 and the Big Ten might have been a catalyst for people to start thinking much more seriously about what's going to happen with basketball. But I'm very optimistic that we have seen how quickly things change in the situation that we're in, and we're hopeful that all of the precautions that we're taking now, that the fact that we are postponing fall sports, Jerry, it gives us the opportunity to keep learning more about how are we going to practice safely? How are we going to train in an environment that really limits the spread? And I think if we can demonstrate that we do that very well over the next couple of months, then it actually gives us a lot of the knowledge we need to successfully execute basketball, and it improves the chances that might start on time and not have the season disrupted as much as we've seen for some other sports. We all want NCAA basketball to happen. It's very important to us all for a number of reasons. And I think that all of the decisions being made are making that more likely to happen. That's not to say that we won't have to decide about whether or not there should be a delay, or whether or not various conferences will play non-conference schedules. But I think that those conversations are happening, and everybody is waiting to have all the information that we need before making any kind of a decision. I think that we won't see decisions about basketball made for quite some time. And right now, the assumption is we're absolutely going forward with basketball.
How fluid is one of your days as an athletic director? Who do you talk to on a daily basis to try to make sure that you are going in the right direction representing ISU athletics?
Well, the days are pretty fluid. This feels like one great big long day that's been going since March. I can't say that anyone's been sleeping very easy or having very many hours away from their office or home office. In the course of a day, I usually talk to the Big Sky Conference staff, the commissioner and associate commissioner, probably speaking with my colleagues in the Big Sky on either through a committee or an AD's meeting every single day, speaking with colleagues in other conferences daily to see what they're doing and how they're handling the various issues that come up, in constant communication with the compliance office, both here at Idaho State, at the Big Sky, and directly at the NCAA, making sure that we're getting the most recent guidance that there is. Have been on the line as a member of the National Volleyball Committee weekly, trying to gain some insights about how selections and championships will look. But the most important audiences are our medical team, both our university medical team and our athletic department medical group and athletic trainers, monitoring how we're doing with our protocols and the status of our student athletes. Head coaches, every single day, our staff is having conversations about next steps. And more than ever, a lot of Zoom calls and conversations, either one-on-one or with an entire team, or even with the whole population of student athletes, the people that we exist to serve, the ones who are so greatly impacted by all of this, hearing their voices and their concerns, and also sharing back to them the information that we have, has been extremely important. It's also a great, it's something that for me is very uplifting, is to talk with them and to see their positive attitudes and the way that they're rolling with these punches. So I'm very grateful for that. But I feel like my battery in my iPhone is dead by 10 a.m. It needs a full recharge, and it's a day full of those conversations for sure.
How often do you talk to President Satterley about what's going on with athletics?
Well, certainly communicate with President Satterley daily. He has been concerned to make sure that we're doing our best for our student athletes in terms of providing them with the best environment for their health and safety and for their training and just their personal well-being, their emotional well-being. So speaking with him daily, absolutely. And other units across campus that are helping to support athletics. And quite frankly, during a time when some athletics functions are compromised, our staff and our coaches are getting involved in other areas on campus and have been involved in some of the enrollment pushes and the calling campaigns to help prospective students get enrolled and admitted and applied, and just doing our part to really make this concept of being one university, one team, make it rock and roll.
You mentioned being in contact with the student athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get a general consensus from them about the decisions being made about moving forward or postponing seasons?
Well, up until this announcement was made, the greatest sentiment was that the unknown was very scary to them. It was very uncomfortable. They really just wanted to know one way or another how they were going to proceed this fall. They understand the decision. They're grateful for the efforts to safeguard their health and well-being, and they're really grateful for the opportunity to now be in an environment where they can get instruction and where they can get training, which they didn't have when we really went dark in the spring. So they've been optimistic, and they've said, you know what, great. We have these months to get prepared and to get ready to have an excellent spring season. We're going to use this time to get better. I've been impressed by their attitude of what can we do in this moment to get better at Idaho State University. That's their attitude, and I couldn't be more proud of them.
So to be specific, we've already talked about the Big Sky's decision to move the 2020 football season to the spring of 2021, and now talking about postponing all of the other fall sports in terms of both non-championship competition and those who, including soccer and volleyball, who would be playing for titles, and I assume outdoor track and field as well. As you look at these sports moving to the spring, and I don't know specifically how many are being considered for spring besides football, how do you approach the potential scheduling of all of these activities, especially football, if it obviously it would seem that there would have to be some crossover into the end of the basketball season, and we already see that with the end of football and the start of basketball in a regular year.
Sure. Well, it brings a lot of challenges. And by the way, all of our sports we're anticipating spring schedules. So a big part of this task will fall on the Olympic Sports Committee of the Big Sky Conference to sit down and navigate through those schedules. So we're gathering some data and some research right now across the conference as to what schools have major facilities conflicts and between which sports. So we can figure out how to try to schedule and address those in the best way possible for the conference schedules. Our biggest challenge is going to be the overlap of football and indoor track and field. And we're having some major discussions right now about how we're going to create a suitable training environment for indoor track and field when Holt Arena is not going to be available for much of the early spring. So that's a huge hurdle. But there are some real bright spots in this too, Jerry. You know, we've got Davis Field that's going to be complete and going to be ready to go in plenty of time to execute outdoor track and field there, and a soccer season instead of having a disrupted season on ICC Field, which was a fantastic option that we're so glad was there, but they're going to be having their season at Davis Field, and we're going to be able to begin using that venue right away. We think that through some careful scheduling, we can alleviate most of the overlap. What this is going to be is a huge test for our game operations staff and for our athletic training and medical staff. I think there is a good chance that we'll be needing to pick up some personnel to help make all of those things go off smoothly. So the Olympic Sports Committee will tackle that. I serve on that committee, and we had a 2-hour-long meeting this morning beginning to have those discussions about how we should stagger seasons. I do think you'll see that most of the seasons will start as late in the spring as we can. We've had some feedback from the championships committee of the NCAA that most of those championships will take place in May to give us the most time to execute our seasons. So I'm optimistic that it's not going to be ideal by any means, and it's not going to look like any season we've ever seen before, but we're going to be able to make it work.
Financially, for ISU athletics, there has to be drawbacks to this. And you already mentioned the possibility of needing to add potentially some staff to handle the operations of all of these sports going on at the same time. And besides drawbacks, are there any financial blessings that might come out of this?
Well, it was a blessing that prior to this pandemic becoming the significant global issue that it has, we did get our budget in order, and we had presented a balanced budget that allowed us and afforded us a little bit more room than we have had in the past to be able to absorb some of these impacts. We've had some benefits from some competitive bidding that we've done for some of our major services that have saved us some funds that we can invest elsewhere. We have the benefit of some of the CARES Act funding that we know ultimately is going to assist with some of the testing and other COVID-related expenses. And then certainly in not executing a fall season, we've been very, very conservative with things like equipment. Our recruiting budgets, with all of the quiet periods and dead periods being extended as they have gone to nearly zero for the time being, and we've allocated those resources elsewhere. And so many non-conference travel events and competitions being canceled, certainly the expense of that travel is then reallocated into other things. Losing the guarantee games, the NCAA revenue really fell into last year, so that's not the same kind of a challenge this year. We're hoping to see all of that. And then the opportunity to host fans at a more robust level in the spring than we ever could have hoped in the fall is another great opportunity to help us balance that budget. So there are some silver linings in really getting great attendance in the spring. But I'll tell you, another thing that's extremely uplifting to me has been the response of our fans and season ticket holders, Jerry, to moving fall sports to the spring. We've had very few. I mean, you can count on less than one hand the number who have actually said, we want the refund. They are rolling it over. They are saying, we want to support the Bengals in this year, no matter what. And we're not seeing a huge disruption in the desire to keep those tickets and to continue to fulfill those Bengal Athletic booster pledges. So our boosters are always a bright spot, and our fans and constituents, and they just continue to answer the call. And we did have a great fundraising year. So things like the Champions Fund and all of the individual sports clubs are at great balances right now that are going to be invested in making sports happen this year.
One of the other ramifications would impact the student athletes. Has there been fallout in terms of athletes having to make a decision, particularly those who would have completed their senior seasons in the fall and graduated at the end of the fall semester? Are you losing athletes who have decided that, well, we're going to go ahead and graduate and then move on with our lives instead of participating in the spring?
Well, I certainly think that's a possibility. We're not seeing that happen yet. I think that those decisions are really going to be pending additional guidance from the NCAA about the opt-out and about what eligibility will look like in the spring if student athletes graduate in December. I think that there'll very likely be some relief legislation that makes it possible for them to take advantage of that final season when it happens in the spring. And those things are being determined, and we should get a lot more guidance later this month. I think for them, they're agonizing over decisions to opt in or opt out if they have underlying health conditions or if they just don't feel quite safe. We've assured our student athletes since way back, even before we were directed to do it, that they wouldn't have to make a choice between their scholarship and their health, and certainly they're not going to have to. So they know that their financial aid is intact. They know they have the opportunity to do at Idaho State what they came here to do, and that is study and get a degree. And an awful lot of bodies of responsible people are making sure that they'll have what they need to execute their seasons as well. So I think we'll definitely see disruption to our rosters, but we'll be able to recruit to any attrition, and it's likely that we'll recover on that end as all these decisions shake out.
Let's go back to football, moving to the spring. You talked about losing the money games, the non-conference games. Idaho State had games scheduled with New Mexico and Fresno State, and then Northern Iowa, I believe,
yes,
was
Northern Iowa.
Holt Arena. Those were the three non-conference games on the schedule. What's the status of non-conference football looking at a spring season?
Well, the Big Sky has voted that there won't be playing any non-conference games. It's just there's not enough time to have the proper preparation to do 3 weeks of non-con and then 8 games. The spring just isn't long enough when you don't have the summer preceding it to really have the kind of preparation that we need. And in overlapping with the rest of the sports, it just becomes a very daunting proposition to try to do that and have any semblance of a championship that might happen in May. So I think we've resigned ourselves to a conference only season, but we have continued conversations with all 3 of those opponents because we want to make those games happen in the future. University of Northern Iowa is absolutely going to return the game to us in a future year, and we will have that FCS game as is our goal every year here in Holt Arena. So it's been great to work with those institutions to make those games happen down the road. And it's just the kind of a year when there are not a lot of non-conference opportunities on the table in any sport.
Is it going to be inevitable with football being played in the spring that football games may have to start a little earlier in the day with other games on campus at night, or would it be flip-flopped? A lot of doubleheader weekends?
Well, there certainly will be overlapping and doubleheader weekends. The good news is that the people of Southeast Idaho are going to be able to take advantage of a lot of really great scheduling and a lot of activities happening on our campus in our athletic department. Again, the sports committees at the Big Sky level are thinking very carefully about scheduling. I don't think that major changes to the time that football plays or the day that football plays are inevitable at all. I do think that across the sports that play Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Sunday, like soccer, that we could see the need to go to some different days so that some sports are Thursday, Saturday, others Friday, Sunday, and there might be a lot more midweek games than we've been used to in the past. But we've got to consider attendance at class at the very top of all of those scheduling efforts, and we'll be doing that. But that's where the great need comes into hopefully being able to stagger the start of some of these seasons and really start volleyball, for instance, hopefully towards the end of a basketball season so that we limit that overlap. So I see most of these starting later in the year, and there will be days where there are 2 or 3 competitions happening.
Are there any other points that you want to touch on that I haven't brought up?
Boy, I think you've covered a lot, Jerry. I just would say that we're ready. We're ready to take this time in the fall to get better as Idaho State University athletics. I think that we've been responsible and put ourselves in a position where we can actually make some gains. We're going to be working really hard to just enrich the lives of our student athletes in ways that we don't always have as much time as we want. We're going to work on their mental health. We're going to work on different aspects of sport psychology and give them tools that they need to use in competition that maybe they haven't been able to dive as deeply into in the past. We're going to have a lot of conversations about diversity and inclusion and just do a lot across our department to give our students as much education and as much team building as we can and get better in all the ways that we can get better. So we're going to nurture their minds and bodies and support them in every way that we can. And it'll be great to spend that kind of quality time with them, both for our coaches and our staff, and we're going to take advantage of every bit of it.
Pauline Thiros, Athletic Director at Idaho State University. Thanks again for your time. Another great interview with a lot of useful information. Good luck on that fluid schedule every day. And I guess all we can do is cross our fingers that we're able to launch basketball on schedule.
We're going to be ready to roar. And I sure do appreciate our Bengals in this community. You are all coming through in a significant way. So thank you. You're making a big difference for us right now. So have a great.
Thank you. For Pauline Thiros, I'm Jerry Miller with another edition of In Depth.